Every morning, before the sun melted the frost on the hangar roofs, I stood by the rust-bitten fuselage of the old Phantom. A relic, they called it. She had no wings now, just memory embedded in scorched metal and faded markings. I wasn't on payroll. No ID badge, no salutes. I was the shadow sweeping the oil-stained concrete, polishing bolts no one cared about anymore. They let me be. Perhaps out of pity, perhaps because some uniformed soul recognized the fire once lit behind these eyes. Or maybe they simply didn't notice me. An invisible man wrapped in tattered denim and silence. The plane. She wasn't just a machine. She was all I had left. A whisper of purpose, of duty once honored. I knew every groove in her frame, each rivet's story. I talked to her. Not aloud, just under my breath, as though the ghosts of her cockpit were listening. "Remember Da Nang?" I'd murmur, tracing soot-blackened panels with my cloth. "That mission where we almost didn't come back?" The brass at the base thought of her as junk. Museum-bound, maybe. I saw a different creature, a battle-scarred warrior, grounded but proud. The younger airmen sometimes snickered as they passed, tossing sideways glances or recording videos on their phones. "Check out the janitor playing Top Gun." One laughed. I didn't flinch. I'd been laughed at before, by enemies, by bureaucrats, by my own reflection. They didn't know the weight I carried, the sand still trapped in my boots from foreign soil. The names I repeated in the dark, like prayers I never finished. One day, a storm rolled in, not from the sky, but behind me. I'd just begun wiping down the cockpit glass when boots clicked purposefully across the tarmac. Not sneakers, not the usual sloppy strides. These were deliberate steps, boots that had walked into fire and returned standing. I turned slowly. He was older, maybe in his 60s, tall, shoulders squared like marble columns. His uniform gleamed despite the wind's dust. Silver stars shone on each shoulder, not polished for show but earned in blood. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, looked through me really, like he was scanning an old memory. "You still cleaner?" He finally said, voice low, deep, heavy with recognition. I nodded. "She deserves better." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "So do you." That's when I knew. This wasn't a routine visit. This wasn't curiosity. This was resurrection. He stood motionless beside the Phantom's nose, hands clasped behind his back. I watched his eyes. They weren't just surveying the aircraft. They were digging through time, searching through buried chapters, scraping at layers I thought I'd sealed shut. "You're Sergeant Elijah Ward," he finally said. Not asked, said, like reading an inscription carved in stone. I hadn't heard that name in years. Not from another mouth. Not outside of my own guilt-laced thoughts. "Used to be," I replied, voice dry as rust. "Now I just clean ghosts." He exhaled sharply, not a sigh, something deeper, a release of long-held breath. "You flew her on October 3rd, 91, call sign Hawk 04, mission Shadow Relay. You shouldn't have made it back." "No one did," I muttered. Silence fell between us like heavy fog. Only the occasional gust stirred the quiet, making the tail fin tremble faintly as though the Phantom remembered too. "Why here?" he asked. I shrugged, eyes fixed on the dented intake valve. "Because she's the only one that made it back with me." The general stepped closer, his presence radiating something more than authority, reverence maybe. "They told me you died over Suleimania. KIA. No funeral, no inquiry. Just gone." "I was dead," I whispered, "just not the way they wrote it." Back then, after the crash, I crawled 3 days through blistering terrain with shrapnel biting into my ribs, the screams of my co-pilot still ringing through every breath. I emerged from that place, but never really returned. They declared me lost. I let them. Better to disappear than to become another medal polished on someone else's shelf. I didn't want honors. I wanted silence. "You should have come back," the general said, softer now. We needed men like you. I gave a hollow chuckle. The war didn't stop when I left the battlefield. It just changed uniforms. He looked down, hand brushing the Phantom's scarred metal, the way a priest might touch the altar. Then his eyes lifted again, burning with something new. I came here because someone saw you. A tech snapped a photo. That image made its way up the chain. To me. So this is an inspection? He shook his head. No, this is acknowledgement. It took me a week to confirm the intel, another to get clearance to speak to you directly. Elijah, this isn't about orders. This is personal. He reached into his coat and handed me something. At first, I didn't take it. Then, cautiously, I uncurled my fingers and accepted the weathered envelope. Inside were 3 photos. One of me half buried in mud, blood crusted on my temple, one of the Phantom midair, and one of a young boy in uniform. That's my son, the general said, voice trembling for the first time. He followed your story, wrote a paper on the forgotten aces in high school. You were his hero. You inspired him to enlist. He died in Fallujah last year. A lump formed in my throat like stone. I never got to thank you, he added. He believed courage wasn't medals or speeches. He believed it looked like you, broken, silent, but still showing up. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. All these years, I thought I'd vanished without consequence. Yet here stood a father mourning a son who looked up to the ghost I'd become. The general straightened his posture again. The Pentagon has reopened your file. They're calling it a clerical resurrection. If you want it, there's a ceremony waiting. Full recognition, medals, honors. My hand instinctively tightened on the envelope. I looked back at the Phantom, at her still body, proud even in stillness. We both had scars. But now, someone had remembered. I'm not sure I deserve it, I said quietly. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to deserve it. You lived it. The morning of the ceremony, I stood in front of a mirror I hadn't looked into in years. The reflection stared back like a stranger wrapped in borrowed history. Dress blues I never expected to wear again, boots shined with trembling hands, ribbons I never asked for now pinned to my chest like silent witnesses. My beard, once unkempt and salt-ridden, had been trimmed by a young barber who asked no questions, only nodded with quiet respect. It felt like I was stepping into someone else's skin, a version of me long buried beneath wreckage, guilt, and sand-swept memories. Outside, a convoy waited. Black SUVs gleamed in the base's sunlight, an American flag fluttering at the front, accompanied by 2 uniformed escorts. The general wasn't among them. I'd see him at the hangar. That's where they wanted to hold it. At the Phantom, they'd cleaned her up, not restored. No, they didn't dare erase her scars. But her cockpit now sparkled, her nameplate reattached with reverence, and her broken wing propped gently like a bowed arm honoring a salute. A makeshift platform had been erected beside her, with rows of folding chairs and the base's full brass in attendance. I didn't walk out to applause. There wasn't any, just silence. A respectful, thunderous silence, like the quiet that falls right before a storm touches down. As I stepped onto the platform, I could see them, the young ones, pilots in training, techs who'd mocked me, months earlier now standing shoulder to shoulder, hats in hand. No smirks, no snickers, just wide eyes and heavy hearts. The general stood at the podium. No script, no notes, just conviction. Today, he said, voice strong enough to carry across. The wind, we correct a wrong. We honor a warrior not with medals alone, but with remembrance. He turned to me, eyes fierce with pride and sorrow. Sergeant Elijah Ward disappeared from the records, but he never left the fight. He carried his mission long after the bullets stopped. And today he stands before us not as a relic, but as proof that valor doesn't fade. They called my name. I stepped forward, hands clapped medals against my chest. Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, Prisoner of War Medal, Purple Heart. One by one, each clipped with silent weight, not of metal, but of memory. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't approach the microphone. Instead, I walked to the Phantom, placed a hand on her cool metal. Let the silence stretch. I didn't come back for applause, I said finally, voice low but clear. I came back because something in me never left this place. I turned to the crowd. I wasn't the only one lost out there, and I'm no hero. I'm just what's left of one. Then I saluted, not to the general, not to the flag, but to the broken-winged jet behind me. She'd waited, and I'd finally come home. As I lowered my hand, the first notes of the bugle echoed across the tarmac. Taps. A sound that had followed me in dreams and silence. Now, it played for me. Not as a goodbye, but as a welcome back. When it ended, the general approached. He didn't speak. He just handed me a folded triangle of fabric, the flag once meant for my funeral. I took it in trembling hands, and for the first time in decades, I cried. The ceremony ended, but the ache didn't. The medals lay heavy in a drawer I couldn't bring myself to open again. They weren't what I needed. What I needed was the wind. The day after the honors, I returned to the tarmac. Not in uniform, not escorted. Just me in the same sun-bleached denim and worn-out boots. The airbase was quieter now. Most of the crowd had moved on, cameras packed, speeches finished, but she was still there, the Phantom. She waited like she always had, stoic, battle-worn, patient. I approached her as I always did, only this time, something had changed. The ladder had been fixed, the cockpit cleaned, and there, resting on the pilot's seat, sat a folded flight suit. Mine. I stared at it, breath caught in my chest. On the collar, someone had stitched my name back into place, not typed, hand-threaded, each letter sewn with intention. A note was tucked into the sleeve. You were never forgotten. Now, it's time to fly again, however you choose to. JH no rank, just initials. I changed into the flight suit slowly, reverently. My fingers trembled slightly as I zipped it up, each motion like peeling away years of decay and rediscovering the man I'd once been. I climbed into the cockpit. The seat hugged my spine like an old friend. My fingers rested instinctively on the throttle, the stick, the controls that hadn't moved in decades. Of course, she wasn't going anywhere. She was grounded. But it didn't matter, because memory knows no gravity. I closed my eyes and let the past rush in. The roar of engines, the pulse of adrenaline, the deafening silence when you're the last one in the sky. I imagined her wings lifting again, imagined slicing through clouds lit orange by dawn. In my mind, I soared. The airbase eventually designated the Phantom a permanent display, but not a forgotten one. They set up a small bench beside her, with my name etched into a bronze plaque, in honor of the man who never left her side. Some days I sit on that bench and talk to young pilots. Not about glory, not about war, but about what comes after. The quiet battles, the loneliness, the courage it takes to survive peace. Others join me now. The same airmen who once mocked me now bring their lunch, their questions, their respect. I tell them stories, not the ones with explosions and victories, but the kind where you wake up one morning and decide not to give up. Again. The general visits sometimes, though never in uniform. We don't speak much during those visits. He just stands beside me, hand resting on the plane's skin like it's sacred. And it is. Once he brought his grandson. The boy saluted me. I choked on emotion I thought I'd buried. I told him you were a pilot, the general said. No, I corrected gently, looking at the Phantom, her scars glinting in the sun. I was her guardian. She did the flying. When the sun dips low and paints the sky in colors that only old warriors understand, I sometimes feel it. A rumble in my bones, a whisper through the trees, the rush of wind that only comes when the past speaks, and I know. The sky still remembers, and now, so does the world.